Yo, yo, yo. Hey guys, welcome back to another awesome edition of the Best Practices Show podcast. You know we're geeks about this. Our goal is to bring you the best information anywhere in the world of dentistry to help you improve your practice and your life. And a key piece of this is your data. But a lot of people are scared to talk about the data in a dental practice. Well, today, we bring back our CEO, Dr. Barrett Straub, and we talk about from metrics to excellence, how to make your data work for you. This was a recent presentation that we did that was so good, I thought I would share the audio version on the podcast. So please listen up. I hope you guys enjoy this, and we'll see you soon. All right, we're all set. Barrett's going to be jumping on here in the link. But today we're going to be talking about metrics and what to think about. If you don't track data in your practice, I'm going to highly encourage you to do it. And just if you're not aware of what we do, you're kind of new to our community. We're dental practice coaches, so we coach practices all over the country. And most of them are actually really good practices, and they're kind of stuck, and they just want to get better. And so the data piece becomes important so that we know what to focus on. And there's huge benefits to it. And today we'll cover a lot of that. And then we're going to show you how to make the data work for you. So a couple things if you're new here. If you're not new here, welcome back. We have our To the Top Study Club, and it is growing so nicely. We have 2 groups now of almost 50 doctors in each one of them. And we're going to be adding a 3rd group here. It's fun. It's a regular quarterly meeting that we host. It's a study club. It's our own personal study club where we just share best practices. And we have something called the Golden Ticket. If you haven't been, you can come for free. And if you hate it, you can take all the information, go back and chalk it up as an amazing day in CE. And we know that won't happen. So we believe in it so much. It's so much fun. You can come check it out. We'll take good care of you and you can enjoy it. I'll leave some information about when our next one is. Also, we're re-engineering our BPA. So people always ask, like, what do you do? And I'll give you a little background on what we do and how we do it. There's 3 different levels to how we help dentists and teams. You can obviously do it on your own. So we have a world of resources, probably hundreds and hundreds of videos back in our BPA. And a lot of the tools that we use with our coaching clients, they're solutions to help you improve your practice, whether it be cancellations, whether it be like, how do I do better meetings? What are some of the metrics? This resource that we're creating today will be back there. And we encourage you to join us. We're actually building our own custom app, which will be out in a couple weeks. And that's a lot of fun. And that's the BPA membership. We also have our To the Top Study Club, which I already mentioned. So you can do it on your own. You can do it in a group, or we can help you do it. And doing it in a group is our To the Top Study Club that we have once a quarter. And then lastly, our bread and butter, the main thing that we do is we have our pro coaching program where we have our coaches help practices. We basically make them accountable to getting what they want to get done. And if you want some information on that, we're so happy to help you. So make sure you go back into the BPA and check all of these out, resources out. It is constantly evolving. There's an amazing community. You can ask questions. If you're in between patients and you're like, how do you do this? Just ask the BPA. You're going to see that you're going to get help not only from us, but you'll get member help from a lot of the members in the community. They'll say, this is what I do. This is how it works for me. So, and then like I mentioned, we have it now in an app. You can use the Circle app, but now we actually have our own custom brand app that'll be out in a couple of weeks. So here we go. You ready, Barrett?
I'm ready.
All right, cool.
Sorry I jumped in late. Glad to be here.
We are not techies. So like tech is
Technical difficulties.
Oh my gosh. It's like an ever evolving challenge. But today we're going to be talking about from metrics to excellence, how to make your data work for you. Now, I'm going to give you a flow for today in the next hour and how it's going to work. We're going to cover 9 things. We're going to talk about the why, the importance of metrics in a dental care. And there's 4 huge benefits. It's not just profitability. You're going to improve 4 other buckets in your practice just by knowing what to measure. Secondly, we're going to talk about common pitfalls because we do see pitfalls, people measuring data. And my first thought is, why are you doing that? And it wastes a lot of time, so we don't want you to do that. We're going to show you key clinical metrics, some metrics back there that are specific, that are high leverage points to help you improve your practice back there. We're going to show you the operational metrics that you can use to better the operations. We're also going to show you the financial metrics. What are some of the financial key performance indicators? And then the patient experience metrics. Number 7, people are always like, well, how do I do this? We'll talk about the 3 ways you can do this. And then number 8 is a big one. Like, how do I get everybody on the same page about these metrics so they don't hear from me that it's all about money? And we'll wrap it up with some final takeaways and answer some questions. So let's start with why this is important. We believe this is so important because it is changing faster than ever in dental care. And metrics are more than just numbers. They show us insights. They give us key things. Data doesn't lie. When it's just data. Data often shows us discrepancies, inefficiencies, opportunities. And when you embrace the data, you can really get clear about what you need to do. You can enhance the patient care, and you can drive your practice to bigger and better results. And really, it's one of the cornerstones we use internally because dentists go, I don't know, it's not going that great, or it is going great. And the data usually tells us what's happening in the practice. Now, there's 4 huge benefits. So you might be thinking, why am I on this? What is it really going to do? The first thing is that when you embrace the data that we're going to give you and show you how to use, you're going to see better patient outcomes. Taking these metrics and understanding them, and number 2, getting your team involved, it can improve the treatment plans and patient satisfaction overall, no question. And it's going to lead to better relationships. And I'm going to show you specifically what that means. Number 2, operational efficiency. Some of you don't pay attention to anything that's happening at the front and then kind of gather everything once a month and say, what did we collect and how did we do? I feel tired and we feel out of equity here. When you use data insights, you can streamline your entire operation. You can start to say, let's tighten that up. Let's tighten this up. Let's tighten up this. You can minimize waste. There's just so many ways you can improve the operation. The other thing that happens in dentistry is you can make your practice financially stable and very solvent, where you have cash on hand at the end of the month. You don't have to keep outrunning the wolf. You can look at this month over month or quarter over quarter and go, gosh, we got money in the bank. Wow, this feels better. I can actually breathe now when you follow these metrics. And some of you are on the path to grow. I think you should always grow. Growing doesn't necessarily mean expanding operatories or adding a second location. Growth could be in profitability. Growth could be in less days, higher output. Growth could be better treatments. And so you can sustainably and predictably grow in a way that you don't stress out about it. And I'll tell you firsthand, our company has grown significantly and it's not taking more and more of my soul, which I want that for you. You know, I want your practice to grow. I think all of us, if you're on this webinar, you care about your practice, you want it to grow, you want it to get better, and you don't want it to take up all of your brain space and your soul. So by doing this, you can see there's going to be 4 huge benefits. Any thoughts, Barrett, before I start breaking this down?
No, let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. Now, there are some pitfalls And we see these regularly. Again, this is all we do. We talk to dentists day after day after day about what's going on in their practice and helping. Number one, missed revenue and financial instability. So people more now than ever, again, are working so hard and they have no money. We are shocked, or maybe we're not, by the number of multi-million-dollar producers we get a chance to interact. They don't have any money. And I'm like, how can that be? And so further diagnosis, which we're going to show you in a second, we're going to show you how to use the data correctly so that you can say, I do have money. We also see patient attrition. We see people with 3,500 patients and it's a one doctor practice. I'm like, why? I'm like, I don't know. You don't need every patient. Your job, if you're a young dentist or a mature dentist, is to figure out how many patients you need and then keep them and grow other patients like them. And we're going to give you some data to use correctly so you can pinpoint how to do that. And you can say, this is working. It's inefficiencies that lead to frustration too. I see people chasing gross production, which we'll talk about. Gross production is probably one of the most useless metrics. People say, well, my gross production went from 2.4 million to 3.2, and I still don't have any money and I'm more burnt out. And so it just leads to more and more frustration because you're working harder and harder. It leads to less ideal treatment outcomes. You also put a ceiling on your growth potential when you don't know some of this data and you don't use it correctly, like capacity, like new patients, like perio. So we're going to show you what opportunities exist with that. And it also, I think the last one is most important. It creates challenges with team management. If you and I work together and we're just talking and we don't have any data, we're just having a conversation. And most of it is about how I feel and about how you feel. And nobody in the history of dentistry has made this mistake more than me, because I anecdotally tell people all the time how I feel without any data, and it's caused a lot of problems. Don't do that. So just lean into the data. The data shortens conversations. It makes things simple. It tells us if we're on track or off track. It also helps you sleep better when you go, no, we're doing better. You can actually feel good. You don't tell yourself a story. And I'll tell you, like, the stories we tell ourselves, they're usually not good ones. So you want the data to tell the story. And every single day, I would say almost every day, somebody asks me about burnout. Burnout this, burnout that. And in other parts of the world, I don't think it's this bad here in the US, but in the UK, it's really bad. Burnout is causing half of dentists to consider leaving dentistry. And a lot of this is just overwhelm. People are working too hard. They have too much on their plate. They don't know what to focus on. So they focus on everything. And you just can't. I think now more than ever, work has to be put into a container. And in order for that to happen, you got to have some good data. You got to have some good systems so you can go home and be the person you want to be for those people that are around you. So let's talk about clinical metrics. We'll break this down. I want to make good on the promise I said at the beginning of the webinar. Couple clinical metrics. Now, I'll make sure you guys get this recording, but be sure to take a couple notes. I'm going to start with probably some of the most confusing metrics, and it's your PTD percentage. It's the patient treatment diagnosis percentage. We'll break this down. Barrett, you're going to give some context to this. It's the total number of patients diagnosed with a restorative or elective procedure in the period divided by the number of exams in the period. So you can take a screenshot of this if you want, but I'll show you how we look at it. And if you use Dental Intel, which is the metrics platform of our choice, you can see this really clearly in any period that you choose. So this is an actual practice that we coach. So the question becomes, what percentage of patients seen for exams were actually diagnosed with treatment? So you can see here, there were 670 exams during this period, and there were 392 that were diagnosed. So this is how it's broken down by procedure code, and the actual percentage was 59%. It's a great KPI. One of your thoughts is like, okay, I diagnose everybody. No, you don't. Okay, you just don't, because you have too much history with patients. This is an awesome KPI to talk to an amazing dental assistant and say, hold me accountable. Because if you're like me, you're a wuss. You don't talk about things because you're afraid. And so a great dental assistant can say, okay, how many exams did we do today? And how many times did you discuss treatment? And over the course of a month, say, listen, 59%. It's not great. Let's go to, and it doesn't have to be perfect. If you go from 59% to 62%, you're actually starting to talk about more dentistry. There are millions and millions of dollars sitting in those charts. I can't even say charts anymore. I can say records, okay?
Electronic files. Yeah.
Absolutely. This is a huge, solid indicator of future potential production. Now, I want to add, I want to talk about the acceptance side of things, Barrett, and I'd love for you to give some context to this. Now, I want to go right into the eye of the hurricane. Treatment acceptance rate is the single most misunderstood metrics in dentistry. And so let's talk about PTA percentage, which is patient treatment acceptance percentage. It can be defined as such: of the patients you diagnosed treatment on, how many accept some portion of the treatment? Now, let's break that down. One more thing. I forgot to put this slide in here. One more thing. Don't worry about anybody else's. This is like the worst thing to do, is go, oh, my buddy does this much. Who cares? What you're going to do as a result of this is you're going to figure out what yours is. And it might be bad. It might be really bad. But that's where you start. You might go, well, it's 11%. That's great. Your only comparison is with yourself in this category. Let's go from 11% to 19%, then to 23%, then to 28%. And it may take you several years to drive that number up, but you're going to challenge yourself in a better way. And a lot of it's just going to come back to communication. But you can't start the journey unless you know the numbers. And so here's how we define that. It's the total number of patients who have accepted restorative or elective procedures in the period that you've chosen. Now, let me break this down. There's a couple things you need to look further into this. You can take a further look at this by what percentage of the dollar amount was planned and scheduled, and how do those differ? You got to think about this. Like, if you diagnose a treatment plan with 4 crowns, okay, and a patient schedules one of those crowns, the patient acceptance percentage will be 100%. However, the treatment acceptance percentage will be 25%. So it's important to compare the two, because people go, oh, I have 100% acceptance. No, you don't, okay? And if you do, you're not talking about enough. It's important to understand the difference between patient treatment acceptance and overall patient acceptance. And patient treatment acceptance is a more depiction of financial opportunity. So Barrett, what does this really mean? You're a dentist.
Yeah, so this is a really good one. And let's back up for 1 second. So the value of metrics really increases when I, as a dentist, can see how my day will be different if said number improves. So if we're tracking a number and we don't really know what it's going to mean for us if that number improves, then we shouldn't be tracking it. So rule number 1 is track a number when you know when this number goes up, I know that the outcome will be this, this, and this, and that's why I'm tracking it. So 1, know the why and be able to see or be able to envision how it's going to feel different in your practice when that number improves. Number 2, we want to connect the metric to the success of the practice. So patient treatment acceptance. So for instance, we're going to track these numbers. Why would we even want to track these numbers? Well, 1, if we say, for example, our production goal is $100,000, for example. And then we start tracking numbers and they're like, well, our presented every month is $50,000. The math isn't going to work, right? If we have to do 100 to meet our financial strategies and goals, and we start tracking numbers like, wow, I'm only presenting, when we look at the raw numbers, 50 a month, 50,000, the numbers aren't going to work. How do we increase that 50? Okay. Diagnosis percentage. How many patients that come through for a recare exam are we diagnosing care to? What percentage of them? And then what percentage of them accept something? Now we start knowing that when that number goes up, the diagnosis percentage and the accepted percentage, more people will be accepting care, and our presented dollar figure up there is going to go up.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's like three things. One, presented. Number two, how good am I at presenting care? Patient acceptance. Number three, what level of comprehensiveness am I diagnosing to? The dollar figure. And so the dollar figure is the hardest, in my opinion, and probably the least valuable of these three numbers, because it's more of a lagging indicator. Okay. It's hard to track. So I'm going to say the worst of the four is that accepted dollar figure.
Right.
So I'm going to say diagnosis percentage. How many patients? 10 people came through the door today. What percentage of those was diagnosed something? What and your software or dental intel is going to diagnose that by what went into the treatment plan. Now, what percentage of those people, let's say 8 out of 10, so 80% were diagnosed something. Now, of those 8 people, how many scheduled something? That's what acceptance means in the software. So they scheduled something. Let's say 4 of the 8 actually scheduled something. The other 4 said, I got to go think about it. Okay, so your acceptance rate is going to be 50%. Now, they can accept it later, and that's good. Okay, now, of that 4 that accepted something, how much was accepted in total dollar figure? So you can see, like, each one of these 3 numbers telling something, and we as a dentist have to be able to connect. When this number goes up, I need it to go up because of this over here, and I connected. So when my diagnosis percentage goes goes much higher, and my acceptance goes higher, and I'm getting better at comprehensively diagnosing and treatment planning, so my dollar figure is also rising, guess what's going to happen? We're going to produce more dentistry, collect more dentistry. And so that's the connection for every number for this and going forward that I want the dental listeners out there that are with us today to just connect it to what's it going to mean for me if that number goes up.
Yeah, I love how you call them dental listeners. That's
dental
awesome.
Listeners.
I love that.
Dentists.
So now here's another thing. Here's what we do all day long. So please don't hear that we want you to hard sell dentistry. The reason this is so important is you as a dentist, if you're a wuss like me, you love people. Here's step number 1. Talk about the truth every time. Then have a team member hold you accountable to what you did and just try to improve it. If you're not good at any of this, make sure you're talking about it every single time and not barbecue and what happened this weekend in sports and all. Talk about their dental health and how they can get healthy, and have a great chairside assistant hold you accountable to having more concise, clear, honest conversations. And I promise you, they will also give you feedback that all of this is going to get better over time. And if it doesn't, get help from a coach, get some help. So those are some real simple, quick wins. And regardless of whether you have a great practice or you're just getting started, for the long haul, you need to know those numbers just so that you can be the best you can be. So another piece. Go ahead.
That's a great point. If your diagnosis percentage is 100%, you're overdiagnosing. So this is a number we want to increase,
right? But
only you can say where the sweet spot is. And you should not be diagnosing something on 100% of patients that come through. So don't hear that, again, to where we want a hard sell or fine dentistry. Heck no. It's all got to be ethical on the up and up.
Yeah. And again, the reason we're doing this whole webinar, you guys, this is all we do. These are the quick wins, quick opportunities that if you just do this, I promise you it's going to get better. Another clinical metric that's very important is the periodontal data. Now, perio visit percentage is the main one. Perio diagnostic and acceptance, those are bonuses. So let's just start with perio visit percentage. You're diagnosing, patient acceptance and a perio treatment, blah, 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 on and on and on. But when you use this, you're going to start to see the perio diagnostic percentage, perio acceptance, perio visit percentage. And additionally, you can measure the success of this. This metric informs the percentage of patients seen in hygiene that were seen for periodontal services versus preventative. Now, I'll say this. When we get a practice, a lot of times they're really well trained, but the perio visit is terrible. And it could be for a bunch of reasons. Number one, they're terrified. Number two, they're doing perio, but they're not coding it as perio. They're serving champagne and charging for water. And as you watch those 4,000 codes just go up by talking about it, you're going to see patients get healthier. And when perio percentages go up, period, you see higher percentages, you see higher things happen in restorative. So it becomes, and it's also a philosophical thing. Do you believe periodontal disease is important to address with patients? And if the answer is yes, we should see these percentages fairly high in your practice. Now, again, comparing with everybody else is probably not a great thing, but we do often get practices that perio visits are 1%. And then they get to 5%. And they're like, wow, I can't believe we did that. That's so cool. That's a great time to celebrate with your entire team. Barrett, what else does this mean as far as perio visits?
This is a great one. Again, we're going to connect it back. So unfortunately, metrics really have no feelings. And sometimes they really can humble us. And so again, what's your periodontal philosophy of care? Okay, now let's see if the numbers bear what you say and what make that true. So I'm not a periodontal expert. I don't have the numbers, but there's a large percentage of Americans that have periodontal disease at one point in their life. I remember 80%. What percentage of patients in your practice have some level of active periodontal disease? I'll bet it's higher than you know or believe, and I know we could find that number. So theoretically, if X% of people have active periodontal disease in your practice, then this periodontal diagnosis number should be closer to that number. So if 50% of people have, just throwing out numbers, for example, if 50% of people have active periodontal disease at some point or some level, and we have a periodontal ratio of under 10%, we're underdiagnosing now. So this is a metric that holds us accountable to our philosophy, pre-stated periodontal philosophy, and tells us, are we treating periodontitis up to the standard of care, or are we under-treating? Yeah. So this is another one that connects our philosophies, and we can see, where's my practice performing? Am I just doing prophies? And if that number is super low, then you are, or am I doing a comprehensive periodontal philosophy?
Yeah, and you can, so many things that I could add to that, but we have to keep this to an hour. So as you can see, if you're watching the video version of this, you're going to see, just by tracking these metrics, you're going to learn a lot. And you may have 4 hygienists. As you can see from this graphic, the top hygienist perio visit percentage is 68%. Well, we call that best practices. You can actually turn your practice into a learning lab. If I was at 41% or 28% or 11%, my first thought as a hygienist is like, I got to learn from number one. What are you saying that I'm not saying? And what you learn in that moment is gold. Like, it's gold. So having these numbers be transparent, it reduces inefficiency. It creates high levels of visibility. It allows for best practices, and you can create a system in which your practice gets better without you having to push it all the time. You can say, hey, I want you guys to get together and share best practices. Our leaderboard this week is Sally. So it's just really cool. And again, I can't scream enough. These metrics tell us so much. So it's good stuff.
One more quick thing on the perio. So a lot of dentists, a lot of us would look at periodontal visit percentage and we say, gosh, that's too low. I really want to increase that. And then we look at it. So let me say this. Metrics are not just to look at and scratch your head at. So many of us would look at periodontal visit percentage. It's going to be too low. We want to increase it. Next month comes around, like, it's still too low. Come on, let's do better. Another month go back. It's still too low. Let's do better. A better way to do it is to say, how is periodontal visit percentage going to increase? Step one, I have to diagnose it. Let's pay more attention to that. Is my diagnosis percentage going up? Okay, it's starting to increase. Now, I'm diagnosing it more. Great. That's step one. Now, are we able to communicate and sell it? Now, periodontal acceptance. First diagnose it, now get better at selling it. And guess what happens when those two go up? Periodontal visit goes up. So periodontal visit is more like a lagging indicator, and you got to pay attention to diagnosing and acceptance, just like the same connection we made with the treatment acceptance.
Yep. Very well said. Very well said. Now let's get into the operational metrics. And again, there's a lot more to measure, but we're giving you the easy ones that make the most impact. Couple operational metrics. Number one, cancellation rates. It's the percentage of patient appointments that were marked broken or canceled. Now, there's inherent challenges with that. People don't cancel appointments in dentistry. They drag them. So if a patient cancels, they'll drag it from a Tuesday to a Wednesday. You have to teach your team and learn how to break an appointment. Yes, it does take a few extra seconds, but in doing so, you learn so much. So you have to look at those cancellation rates, because if your cancellation rates are high, it's adding inefficiencies everywhere. People don't know their cancellation. Great practices don't know their cancellation rate. So they pull it and they go, well, we're only at 3%. Well, you guys don't break appointments, so you wouldn't even know if that number is real or not. And so you have 3 people at the front and they spend 75% of their day putting out fire after fire after fire because they don't know how to break appointments. They just know your head's going to spin around and green puke's going to come out if their chairs are empty. So they're like, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. What a horrible waste of time for those 3 amazing people that you have at the front. Cancellation rate percentage tells you a lot. And if it's at 11% or 12%, I can already tell you without knowing you, that people don't respect you. They might like you, but they don't respect your time. And you have to change the narrative on how that works. Another number that's really important, one of our favorites, is capacity. Now I'm going to break down that with an illustration here in a second. It's the percentage of time available that you have patients actually scheduled, butts in the chair, and your capacity has to be high in order for your operation to be profitable. And then lastly is pre-appointment percentage. Now, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this one, but it's the percentage of active patients that you've seen within the last 18 months that currently are scheduled with an appointment. So crazy important in that. And so I want to take capacity apart because this is a big one. There's a capacity issue. And the real capacity issue is this, that maximum capacity means every chair in your operatory is full every day you work, but it doesn't necessarily only mean that. In almost every dental practice, maximum capacity is an issue of willingness, not ability. Let me explain. It's not like, oh, we just scheduled. Like, willingness for me is like, no, I'm part of the solution here. I'm a hygienist. I have 8 hours with patients. I'm going to make sure that those patients that are scheduled are actually showing up, and I'm going to be responsible for my own capacity, and I'm going to be held accountable to that, to the doctor and the rest of the practice, so I can show them I was at 92% this month, instead of passing the buck to the front desk person and saying, your job is to keep my chair full. That's a huge shift in being a healthy dental practice. So the willingness starts with you, doctor, at the top. And so this is an old capacity tracker. I like this one because it's actually one of yours, Barrett, but it's really simple. And I'll give you the updated one that we have. It's what percentage of the time do you have patients in the chair during the schedule? And so you can talk about your hygiene department, but your profitability is directly impacted by optimizing the capacity. So if you're watching, again, the video version of this, you can see in the month of May, Sally had these days available. Now, it's just a sheet. It's just a sheet. And it's real simple. In one column, you have the number of hours that you had available. And then in the next column, of the 8 hours I had available, I saw 6 patients. You add them up at the end of the month, and you divide those numbers, and you have a capacity percentage. Once it gets below 92%, you are eating into profitability. What makes this so easy is it's a simple piece of paper with 2 columns and 2 numbers that have to be entered every day. Other thoughts, Barrett?
Well, first, I just want to thank Dr. Gary DeWoods out there watching, and he shared the actual periodontal percentage. So I just posted that in the chat. Any questions, put them in the Q&A. I do have CE in there as well. But this schedule optimization is so important. Cancellations, no-shows, optimization. This is the stuff that kind of gets you hot under the collar, and it's very easy to track this. And it is a red flag when the numbers aren't what you thought to highlight operational deficiency. So we talk a lot about a dentist being 3 leaders, right? You're the clinician, you're the entrepreneur, and you're the leader. And most of our time has to be in the dental chair doing dentistry. And so we're not up front. We're not always watching and auditing and helping coach up our admin team. So these 3 numbers are super important to track so that we can say, hey, I've noticed that cancellations are going up. I've noticed that our chair utilization is going down. Let's dig into the systems and operational processes so that we can improve those. And so that there's nothing that makes dentists more upset is when a full schedule turns into a 70% utilization schedule due to a couple cancellations and a couple no-shows.
Yeah. I could spend another 20 minutes on this one. There's so many benefits to this, and I'll give you 2 more whys. This is important. A lot of dentists are expanding. They're adding operatories, but they're adding operatories on top of operatories that are already inefficient. So they're at 72% and they're adding 2 more. Well, I can tell you there's very little, if any, profit coming from those operatories, and you're just making this mess a little bit bigger. And you know how difficult it is to find great team members. Before you expand or suggest or entertain anything about growth, you should be consistently at 92 or 95%. There's one more piece of capacity. Once you get there, now you got to start working on patient selection. 3,500 people, not all of them are good for hygiene. Now you start thinning the schedule to people that show up, pay, and are the right fit for you. Now you can build a sustainable patient base with the right type of people. That's smart design. So anyone who tells you just add another op to add production, well, the gap between gross production and net production is getting bigger every day in dentistry. And this is the source, I believe, in a lot of burnout, because a lot of dentists, I run into dentists all the time adding operatories. I'm like, why? Because we're growing. You're growing? Yes. I'm getting an associate. Well, tell me about your associate. Well, I don't have him yet. You're building an operatory for an associate you don't have yet, and your capacity is not at the right place. So, final point, make sure your capacity is where it needs to be. You should never expand from a position of weakness, only from strength. Like, we are bursting at the seams. We're full, and we're full with the right type of people. Now we can think better about this. Another piece of this is new patients. Now, new patients are important. They got to be the right patients, but to build your practice entirely on new patients is not smart. We're going to help you think smarter about that today. We're going to talk about new patient acquisition and retention. Let's first define new patients. In Dental Intel, it's the number of patients who have had a first completed visit in your practice. They're counted as a new patient by the code, the ADA code. There's another number that's important in new patients. It's called recaptured. This is the number of patients that have not completed a visit within the past 18 months. And I'm going to show you why that's important in just a second. But now have completed a visit, blah, 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 blah. There's another number. And so I'm going to give you a couple numbers here with new patients. So we've got new, recaptured, lost, and growth. Lost is the number of patients that have fallen into the category of not having a completed visit within the last 18 months. And you know who you are. You're like, no, I got all these new patients. No, you got a new patient in. You had a big comprehensive exam. You presented $12,000 to a perfect patient for your practice, but they weren't ready to hear it. And now your team member at the front is stalking them over and over and over and over again, and they're not picking up, and you just lost a great patient into the universe because they weren't ready to hear the $12,000 number. Sometimes you just got to go slow and think about the long term. The real number in new patients that's important is net growth. This is the number of new patients, less the lost patients. It's important that new patients are great, but what's the net on this? So this is an actual practice. I took a screenshot of this. So this practice during this period had 22 new patients. They recaptured 22, but they lost 82 out of the window of 18 months. So our net growth was minus 38. And let's spend more money on Facebook ads. It's just not smart. And so you're doing this well when your growth is net positive. And so here, we're going to help you with this a little bit. So it's the percentage of new patients who've been reappointed for hygiene that's really important. So if you look at the graphic on the screen, this particular practice had 22 new patients, and 17 of them were reappointed for hygiene. So you're looking at 77% in that example. Now, think about this. I want you to think about this. Sometimes when patients come to your office, they're not ready for your system. Like, they got to go see the oral surgeon first. They got to see the periodontist first. Or we got to refer them out. Sometimes we got to do an emergency appointment. So let's dispel all that they got to fit into our system first. I want you to think about a good patient's calling us. I'm going to tether them to the practice. Write that down. I'm going to tether these people to the practice, and we'll still follow our system. So I'm going to suggest this. This is a quick takeaway. If you're a team member that works the admin, you're going to bring a great patient in. You're going to listen to them. And then when you schedule them, whether it be with the doctor, whether it be with the oral surgeon, whether it be in hygiene first, whether it be an emergency, whatever it is, pause after you get that scheduled and say this. Well, you could say this before. I'm going to schedule 2 appointments. I'm going to get you over to our oral surgeon. I'm going to schedule with our doctor. I'm going to schedule with our hygienist. I'm going to schedule this, but I'm actually going to schedule 2 appointments right now. And I'm going to schedule with our doctor, and I'm also going to schedule in hygiene because you sound like an amazing patient. And we want to make sure that we keep you healthy for a long term. Our practice is growing, and I don't know if I have a spot for you in hygiene right now, but I'm going to make sure you're in our schedule. Now, one more thing, and Barrett, I want you to comment on this. It's important. This is a bonus number. Like, you got to write something down about where they came. You can break down your new patients because a lot of you are spending time and energy and resources on new patients, but there's nothing in the computer on where they came. So if you're looking at the graphic here, you got to put in the source. We can start to allocate dollars or efforts based on where these patients came from. I'm shocked by the number of patients we see. There's nothing in there. Where did this patient come from? Even here at Act Dental, one of my first questions when we meet a new person is like, how did they find their way here? Wouldn't you want to know that? So it's important that that's part of your checklist. There's got to be data in there. So Barrett, anything else you would add about new patient numbers and acquisitions?
Yeah, just quickly go back to that one. Yeah. So I like every dentist, always track new patients, where they come from, how many do we have a month? We give so much energy to new patients, and they're hugely important. And I had so much anxiety when I learned about recaptured and lost, and I realized how many people were leaving my practice without me even knowing it. And if we think about it, the more recapturing a patient is much easier than attracting and selling yourself to a new patient. So while we need new patients, this patient that somehow got through the cracks is not scheduled and now is 19 months out of seeing us for no other reason than life just got in the way. It's a lot easier to get them back in the fold versus attracting a new patient. And so you can't just look at new patients. That recaptured number is amazing. And we want to get the growth, the net growth, to be positive. When net growth is positive, your need for new patients goes down. You always want them, but you're not stressed like, I need to get the 12 a month or whatever your number is, if you can recapture your patients. Now, how do you keep recaptured high and net growth positive? And it's all the operational things. It's tethering to the practice, like Kirk just said, and it's printing a report. There's a report in everyone's software that should be one of your top 3 favorite, is like, who are my active patients that aren't on the books?
Yeah.
Now, one report. Next report is who has recently gone non-active, meaning they've crossed that 18-month mark and they haven't been in. They didn't say, no, I want to see you. They didn't say I'm going somewhere else. They just crossed an arbitrary 18-month. Those two reports, your admin team really should be using them, crossing them, calling them, getting them back in so that those recaptured numbers go through the roof, lowering your dependence on new patients.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm so glad you said that. And what Barrett's referring to, that first report, the name of it is unscheduled active patients. So somebody should own that responsibility. Now, it's going to give you chest pain if you pull that report today. And you're a well-meaning, you're going to go, holy crap, there's 732. Think about it. There's 732 unscheduled active patients in your practice right now. These are patients. These are real people that haven't been tethered to the practice. So here's what you can do. You don't have to get all of them in, but Sally at the front can go, okay, there's 732. Next week, there'll be 711. The week after that, there'll be 688. The week after that, there'll be 672. The week after that, there'll be 650. You get how this works. 2 months of doing that, your hygienists are going to go, stop. There's nowhere to put these people. And you'll go, good. That's a good problem to have. Now we can work on patient selection. So it's really, you guys, this is why we love this. It's so predictable. It's crazy predictable on how to make a practice better. If you focus on this stuff and the behaviors and the philosophy, you can't make it all about money. It's not about money. It's about health. I like to refer to metrics as health. Think about it as your body. Your practice is your body. We got to make sure the cholesterol is in the right place. We got to make sure your heart rate, your blood pressure. And when these numbers are off, there's countermeasures. And so when you keep them healthy, you're going to see it performs better. Everybody feels better. So just important on these. Now, financial metrics. Let's talk about financial metrics. And we're just going to talk about them, not necessarily do a deep dive, but gross production, again, it's one of the most useless numbers that you'll ever have in your practice. But it's the full effort that goes into producing your dentistry. Now, I'll just give you the skinny on that. We get this all the time. 2 practices gross producing $2 million are not the same thing. One's writing off 40%, which means they're writing off $800,000, which means their net production is 1.2. The other one collects all the $2 million. It's a different story. So I don't care what people gross produce. I care what you keep and how hard did you work for that. Net production is the dollar amount of production after adjustments are made. It's basically collectible. What can we collect from this? And write-offs are skyrocketing, higher than ever. Like prior to the pandemic, it wasn't unusual for us to find 25% or 27%. And now it's not unusual to find people writing off 42, 43, and even higher percentages, which means you're working half of your days for free. Don't do that anymore. Collections percentage, that's the percentage of money that it actually receives from its billable services. And we like net collections to be 100%. I did say that correctly, 100%. I listened to other webinars in dentistry and people are like, well, it's okay to be 97, 98%. No, it's not. That money is owed to us. And that is something you can always work on. Verbal skills matter. Team member, you're leaving 3% on the table if it's at 97%. Accounts receivable, it's the total money owed to your practice. Write this down. When patients owe you money, they don't like you. Don't get into a situation where people continuously run up their bills and don't pay them. And then overhead percentages, these show the fixed and variable costs. Now, that is a different conversation now too, because let's take the 2 practices that produce gross produced $2 million. One net collection is 1.2 million, and the other's net production is, much higher, probably 1.9 million. Overhead percentages comparisons would just be a waste of time. One would say, well, my overhead 72%. What's your team compensation? Well, you're playing with different dollars over there. One practice has $800,000 more in cash to deal with and pay people, so the percentages would be lower. So overhead percentages are important, and that's why I'm going to ask you to watch the GAPS formula information that we have that'll actually tell you exactly what that means. Now let's go to patients. This is an important one too, because you're thinking, okay, well, I get all that. What about the patients? Let's talk about patients. Your patients are your customers. So an important metric is like reviews, testimonials. I hope you're getting reviews. I hope people want to spread the word. So how do you do that? And it's often good to have somebody responsible for measuring reviews. Are we getting any reviews? What gets measured gets improved, but what gets measured and reported on significantly improves week to week. So if you have a team member who's like, okay, we're at 401 reviews, let's see how we can do it. And then the next week she goes, we're at 411. Wow, what happened? There's real-time learning in that. So Google rating too, what's the average rating patients give you? It's important. It gives you great immediate feedback. And then internal referrals. These are the number of new patients that have joined your practice due to other patients. So where do they come from? What is really an internal referral? Your internal referrals will always be some of your best patients because they come highly referred, knowing the rules. So these are important metrics on the patient experience side of things. Now, one of the questions might be, well, how do I collect data? There's really only three ways. You can use a great tool like DI, Dental Intelligence. We actually love it. We use it. It tells us more sometimes than we want to know. You could use your practice management software, which is an awesome tool. And then there's the manual way to do it, which is actually awesome too. But a lot of times people don't know what to measure. Anything you would add about this? Because people always ask, well, how do I do this? Sometimes you just got to step up and put a spreadsheet together. I mentioned this on the last webinar that we did. People are always like, well, how do you measure the financial health of your business? We at Dental do it here on a spreadsheet. QuickBooks is a tool for managing expenses and all. It doesn't tell us the health of the business. If you can put a sheet together, you can see how it works. And if you have trouble with this, reach out to us. We're so happy to help you. We can actually help you with some type of a sheet that'll help you say, I know that I'm getting better. You got to use a tool at the end of the day. And one last thing I would say about a tool is a lot of times we like to send this to somebody else. I'm going to have a team member do this. I'm going to have somebody else do this. No one will ever care about your business as much as you do. And no one will ever understand your business as much as you do. So I think being an entrepreneur, it requires that you use a tool. Wouldn't you agree, Bo? I just called you Bo. I actually have
Bo's his son. Bo
is my son, and I have a physical therapy appointment with him. And I say, oh, don't you agree, buddy? So
absolutely. If you own your business, you got to just do it. Get in there and run the numbers. There's no easy button. There's ways to make tracking data more efficient and not time consuming, but it does take some intentionality. And the only way you're going to learn from those numbers is if you're part of tracking them and understanding what they mean.
Yeah. Now, again, this webinar was not designed for the entire solution of data. The goal was to give you some things that have high leverage and high ROI. There's obviously other things that we could cover. And in a minute, I want to open it up for questions that you guys might have. But a big piece of data is getting everybody aligned on what metrics mean to our practice. So how do we get aligned? I think that my new theme for this month is called Tone from the Top. It's the tone from the top that's important from the dentist. It's not about money. It's about making sure this place is healthy, making sure that we're working on the right things. And when we coach a practice, we make that super clear that we're going to be measuring things, but it's not about making more cash and helping the dentist buy another boat or anything like that. Because when you make this visible, you can start to spend your energy in the right place. You could improve things. Again, they shorten conversations. They reduce emotions. Data doesn't have any emotion. It tells you what's going on. The first thing you need is a 90-day scorecard. Kids can work with a scorecard. Golfers have scorecards. Like, scorecards are not new. When you go to get a lipid panel, that's a scorecard. Like, a scorecard tells you if the behaviors are on track or off track. And sometimes it's lagging and sometimes it's leading. We like the idea of having a 13-week scorecard or a 90-day scorecard. It's 3 months of things that we're going to measure. And by keeping them visible and at the front, we're holding ourselves accountable to improving the behaviors that influence these numbers. I think also, too, another thing is everybody should own a number. I don't care if it's the number of times a phone rings and we got to pick it up a second time. I don't care if it's Google reviews. I don't care if it's unscheduled active patients. Everybody's got to own a number, and that refers to accountability. This is one of my pet peeves. People use the word accountability all the time. Well, accountability requires accounting. It's some type of accounting. It's either a number, and if you raise daughters, it's a time that they have to be home. So hold. I think as the tone from the top has to be like, we measure numbers because it's part of our accountability process. It helps us know if we're on track or off track. And then lastly, using a GAPS worksheet or any worksheet, like the one that we have for our To the Top Study Club, it keeps everybody synchronized on why we're measuring something, what does it mean to be successful, and what do we do for countermeasures on a weekly basis to know if we're on track or off track. Anything else you would add about being aligned, Barrett?
I would just say alignment happens when we get over the fear of numbers. We learn to love numbers, not, and the story they tell. And there's one inherent rule of tracking metrics is if you do nothing more than track them and making visible for all to see, they always go up.
Yeah.
Because the person accountable wants to watch their number improve. There's peer accountability. It's just human nature. So even if you don't dig in and don't really know how to improve some numbers, there's a rule out there. If you just track them, they always improve.
Yeah, they always do. So a couple final takeaways. And again, we'll leave some space for questions. If you aren't using metrics to guide your practice, just start small. This might seem overwhelming. Just start small. It might be hygiene capacity. It might be a few things. It might be what we mentioned on this webinar. But just focus on a few key metrics and work with your team. And you're going to find that your team is actually going to enjoy this. One of the things that you have in your brain that I used to have is like, we start talking about numbers, everyone's going to hate this. No, you start talking about it, the opposite happens. People actually start to lean into them and go, I think we can do better than that. And you go, what? It's pretty cool. And you're going to find your favorite team members will, just like Barrett said, they will want them to be better. And you don't have to do this alone. Again, you can do it with a team. You can do it with a coach. It's so cool when you can get everybody involved on how do we make these numbers better. So a couple tools, I'll add them to the chat. We created a roadmap for practice profitability that further illustrates a lot of the things that we mentioned. You're going to see it's going to go into more metrics and the how to do it. We also have a lot of resources back in the BPA. We also did our GAPS formula workshop. If you want a copy of that, in which Barrett took all of it apart over 2 different sessions, you can see exactly how we break down the GAPS formula. We're happy to do that. I'll put the capacity tracker in the chat. You can have a copy of that and use that. And we also put in here a guide of how to talk about numbers and what to do with team meetings and how to run them really well. If you run really poor team meetings, don't do that anymore. Tell yourself a better story about that. And lastly, don't miss out on Napa. We actually put together our Napa Valley Mastery Summit. We did it a couple of years ago. It was the greatest thing. It was the greatest CE experience I've ever been to ever. I was just so grateful to be there. We're going to do it again. And it's almost sold out. There's just, I'm not kidding. There's less than 10 seats left. So if you want to join us, I'm going to encourage you to do it now. Here's what's really cool. You don't have to do anything. All you have to do is show up. We do everything for you. All the meals. You do have to buy your plane ticket. That's all. But we got the hotels. We got all the meals. And you don't even have to come to like a certain things. Like if we say we got dinner planned, you're like, I don't want to go to dinner tonight. You don't have to come. Doesn't matter. You can come and go as you please. You're going to want to show up for the dinners too, because they're epic. So make sure you join us for the Accidental Napa Valley Mastery Summit and To the Top Study Club. So any last thoughts?
Just to use metrics, we are 78% full on Napa. So you're going to want to sign. Yeah, to be exact. Yeah, it's going to be amazing. You're going to love it. We'd love to have you. I put the CE link and the codes in the chat once more, so you can access it there. And we do have, if there's any questions, throw it in there. Otherwise, we're going to get you all the tools.
Yeah, I feel so honored. The great Gary DeWood joined us, man. That's kind of weird because I used to get
him on screen next time.
I know. I used to attend his webinars.
Yes, me too.
Good stuff. Gary, thanks for being on, brother. Appreciate you. So All right. Well, thank you guys for being here. If you want to watch the replay, we're going to send it to you. And then also, if you go back in BPA, you're going to see all of the archives of all of these that we do. We're going to keep bringing it. We love this stuff. We're just so grateful people show up. So Gary says, love you guys. Love you too, buddy. So thank you guys. Barrett, thanks for being here, brother.
My pleasure. It was fun.
Yeah. Hope you guys enjoy your day, and we'll see you soon.